Hello and welcome to my second pass of my transition for Stop Kiss. I'm still doing the transition from scene 3 to scene 4, and I am also taking a stab at the transition from scene 4 to scene 5. So first and foremost, I'm gonna introduce you to our cast and some of our furniture pieces. So this is still Callie. This is still Sarah. This is still Mrs. Winsley. This is still Detective Cole. These are still two stagehands, however, or crew members, but they will be dressed as uniformed police officers. And this taxi is George. Sorry, George. So then for our set pieces, this is going to be our couch in Callie's apartment, and that whole back wall is still the back wall of Callie's apartment, which will be permanent throughout the entire set. I wanted to have the apartment be the main permanent world that other worlds sort of warp and form around. So that is still the back wall of her apartment, and this gap right here is the front door of her apartment. So this is our table, and instead of having a like coffee table like that would then transform into the police station house table, this is going to be I totally stole this idea from Kelly Young because it made complete logical sense for Callie to have a table, like a taller table behind her couch if she has a pull-out couch. I thought that was genius, and I literally spent like 15 minutes after Kelly's video being like, why didn't I think of that? So thank you, Kelly. But yeah, I thought that this would work better for those purposes because I wanted a sort of table that could be used from the transitions from Callie's apartment to other locations, and I thought that a table like that would work perfectly for the other locations besides Callie's apartment. Like, it could be used as an exam table in a hospital, as like a little check-in counter in a waiting room, as in the police station house. I just thought it was way more versatile than trying to get something that sort of shifts sizes, because a coffee table is really only useful in a living room. So that table is a taller desk-like table now. And the other little pieces that our characters will be bringing on is this is the chair that Mrs. Winsley will bring on with her, and this is a chair that Detective Cole will bring on with him. So my transition is I tweaked it slightly, but the big pieces are still the same. So this is where we end scene 3. Callie and Sarah are sort of hanging out. They've just opened beers, and Sarah has decided to stay when they hear Callie's upstairs neighbor making a ton of noise, and Sarah's like, let's go yell at them, and Callie's like, no, I'm gonna mind my business, and Sarah's like, come on, and it ends with Sarah being like, let's go. So on that note of let's go, I still want Sarah to lead Callie off through this apartment door, because I want them to still stay within the realm of like how the apartment functions. And this vom is still to Callie's bedroom, and this vom is still not to anywhere specific in the apartment. So they would exit through the front door of the apartment, and then Mrs. Winsley would still enter from down here. Oop, I forgot her chair. With her chair. And sort of still look around, like almost like disappointed but not surprised when she's like, this is a mess, this is not what the police station house should look like. and then Detective Cole will enter. I keep forgetting their chairs. Detective Cole would enter. I originally had him sort of standing, but I wanted him to enter with his own chair as well, a little bit late to the function, but he shows up with his chair and he's like, hey, oh, this shouldn't be here, which is when he still ushers on his officers to do his dirty work for him, and they still take the couch out and remove it from there. But these guys are dressed as uniformed police officers. I made the decision. So then once that was off, Mrs. Winsley would sort of be standing there like, this still isn't right. And then Detective Winsley would walk over to the table and move it over himself while Mrs. Winsley is like watching, like, yeah, you better do that. Just because Mrs. Winsley has this sort of attitude throughout this scene of like, I had to throw a flower pot at this guy because the cops didn't show up in a timely manner. Like, she just has this attitude of like, you aren't doing your job right. And I feel like Mrs. Winsley probably has that attitude with a lot of people, but in this particular scene it's directed at Detective Cole, and it's really effective. So he would move that desk there, and then they would sit on their chairs. And I still want them to be staged this way so that they're looking at each other and the audience can only see certain people from certain sides and certain angles, just because I like that idea of, in a conversation with a police officer and a witness, it has that sort of energy to it already, of like, whose side are we getting? Whose story is this? Because what a witness says is essentially hearsay, but also we have Detective Cole, who's like not super great at his job, though he doesn't know that. So I like that dynamic of only getting certain information on certain sides. So they go through the scene 4. In the scene, Detective Cole is getting Mrs. Winsley's statement. She's describing what she saw and what happened, and she's very just like straightforward with what she says. And at the end of it is when she makes that comment where Detective Cole is like, you stopped him, the guy attacking Callie and Sarah. And she's like, well, yeah, because it certainly wasn't the cops. It took them almost 30 minutes to get there. Like, you would think this was Harlem, not the West Village. Ha ha. So she ends on that note, and because of that, I sort of wanted to maintain that sense of, like, we're starting to grasp that. I mean, we already grasped from the first scene that Detective Cole appears in that he's not great at his job because of the way that he treats Callie when he's getting her statement. But I really wanted to keep that thread going, this idea of him as sort of bumbling. So I wanted at when the lights go dim for Mrs. Winsley to pick up her chair and very brusquely walk off. Like, she's like, I'm done with this. And then he sort of like lingers there for a moment, a step behind, a beat behind, if you will. And then he places the table back before grabbing his chair and following after her just a moment later. I wanted there to be that sort of lag so we get the sense that Mrs. Winsley is like, that's me slapping my hands together, like she's shaking him off and he's just like a step behind. So then instead of our uniformed police officers, because scene 5 takes place in Callie's apartment once again, I want Callie and Sarah to actually carry on the couch and, you know, be looking at each other and sort of like, even though they're moving a couch, all that they're really seeing is the other person at the other end. And they can have a little moment where they just sort of like bump shoulders, that's not quite join hands, but sort of like, you know, cozy up together and then exit out that way before the scene actually starts. Because then Callie, I would want to enter back in this way with her bouquet of flowers, pretend she is holding that, and go about scene 5, where at the beginning she's like going to she puts the flowers down, she goes to her bedroom, she tries on clothes, etc. The reason that I wanted Sarah to help her move on the couch is to suggest during this like passage of time from the last time we saw them in Callie's apartment, I wanted to suggest that they had been together and been hanging out and that their relationship was growing. And And my other option for like someone within this particular universe of Callie's apartment would be George, but George shows up in the scene. Oh, I assigned George a taxi, but I forgot that I'm not actually using him in this scene. But my other option is George, and because George shows up in this scene and Callie is like surprised and is like, oh, George, what are you doing here? And George is like, I haven't seen you in a while. It would feel weird to me for George to help her in this scene, in this little like in-between time passing phase, because he says that he hasn't seen her in a while. So I wanted Sarah to help her move that couch so that we get a sense that they've been together and hanging out. And we're starting to understand that their relationship is growing. And also the two of them together creates a much different tone from Detective Cole and Mrs. Winsley, which is a little more somber. Like, we understand that something's wrong. That's why Detective Cole is here. Whenever Detective Cole is in a scene, it sort of implies we're in this other timeline where a bad thing has happened. So I wanted to go back to something a little bit softer and more upbeat, with Callie and Sarah still on this upwards trajectory with their relationship. So that's that. That pretty much does it for my pass at this first transition and my attempt at this next transition. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.